see here. Let's get a picture here or something. Why not? Stromburg never seemed to have much of a problem with their throttle shafts. I don't know why. Marvel Sheblers do. Don't know why. But there's bushings in here and the shaft goes through here. And some versions of these carburetors have O-rings in here and some don't. The little ones I don't think do. The bigger ones do. But anyway, as this throttle shaft starts to wear, what happens is, especially at idle, you have a vacuum up top. And that vacuum is desperately trying to get more air. And it'll find it somewhere if it can. And so any air leak that you have right here, that vacuum will suck air right through that bushing and in. So when you first had the carburetor was new and you first set it up and you first got that nice idle rise of 50 RPM and you're so happy, a couple years later that idle rise went away. Well, what happened is throttle shaft bushings wore out, air went through here and it made the carburetor rich or lean? Lean. So now it's running leaner than it used to before. So if it's running lean and you pull back on the mixture, it just runs leaner, so you're just going to get it to die. So sometimes if you're having trouble getting the idle mixture rise out of a carburetor, you keep adjusting, and it doesn't work, chances are you got an air leak somewhere. Air leaks will always show up more at idle or full throttle? At idle, because there's a huge vacuum. Once we get close to full throttle, there's only a 1-inch difference in manifold in pressure between here and out here. So that little bit of difference doesn't draw much air into here. So any sort of leak in the manifold system will always be worse at idle. I built these cylinders one time, 6 cylinders for a helicopter motor, a VO435. And guy was a real jerk. I worked with it way more than I wanted to. And so he brought me the cylinders and overhauled the cylinders, and I sent the cylinders back. And you guys know after overhauling your Lycoming, there's an 1/8-inch pipe plug on all the cylinders, and you guys all tried to plug it. And I said, nah, leave that open. That's where we're going to put the manifold pressure line. Okay, that's also where you put primer lines. You put primer nozzles there. And a primer on an aircraft, it's just like a syringe in the instrument panel. You unlock it and pull it back. Oh, you'll get to use it on the out here. And you push it forward, and it injects fuel into the cylinders so you can start it. So he brought me these cylinders, overhaul for his helicopter, and I overhauled the cylinders, but I didn't plug those holes because they're primer holes. And, you know, you just have to pull the plugs out, and, you know, why bother? But I didn't know what was going on, so I kind of told you the backwards part of it. So now you know what's happening. It's those holes. So he called me up one day. He's like, man, these are the crappiest cylinders I've ever had, and you so-and-so, and all kinds of names. Like, what is going on? It won't freaking run, man. I can't get these things to break in. I've been out there at the helicopter. I've got it. They're ag sprayers. I've got it loaded to max freaking weight, man. I'm just sitting there wide open throttle, max manifold pressure. Been doing it for like 2 hours, and this thing still won't idle. Well, let's think it through. I ain't no thinking it through, man. You better tie every freaking thing you've got down, because I'm coming in hot, and I'm pissed. I'm going to land that son of a bitch right there in your shop, and you're going to fix it. So I'm just like, oh my God. So I went and told the boss, you know, he's mad. He's bringing his helicopter. I got to make sure everything's ready. I don't know, you know, look at it when it gets here. And I didn't show up that day. I didn't show up the next day or the next day. And then pretty soon I forgot about it. And he called later and wanted me, you know, hey, I got to bring in some cylinders for you to overhaul. I'm like, hey, man, whatever happened to that helicopter that wouldn't run? Well, you left all the plugs out of the cylinders. I'm like, well, you mean the primer plugs? Yeah, the primer plugs. I'm like, well, you had to install them, buddy. So, I don't know. That's what happens when you have an air leak. It won't idle.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, lesson learned. I started putting plugs in the cylinders no matter what. They're cheap. You can figure it out. Okay, so air leaks will show up at idle more than anything else. Let's see.
So for those bushings that have a leak in them, is there like a specific?
Hey, you got to take out the throttle shaft, replace it, and rebush it.
Is there like a type of damage indication that we would notice as far as?
You don't get idle mixture rise.
Okay.
And then you can go up on an inspection, like 100 hour. You can grab the throttle shaft and move it back and forth, up and down. You go, ooh, that moves a lot. But it's kind of hard sometimes because that one end over here is already attached to a cable, and it's kind of tight sometimes, and it's spring loaded. And so you don't get a lot. And when you take it apart, like, oh yeah, it really is loose.
There wouldn't ever be like a hole inside of the bushing for the
No,
leak?
the bushing is a round thing, and the shaft goes like that.
Okay.
So you don't get a hole in the bushing. It's just the bushing wears out, and the shaft
The wear. Okay.
shaft is going like that.
Maybe a hole or something.
You know, like that. Man, I'm allergic to your guys' bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. I just have a bunch of stuff here. Always use manufacturer's latest overhaul repair manual. You know, my advice there. Have current service bolt, service letters, instructions when you're working on this stuff. Same old stuff. You obviously use drill bits to measure stuff. That's appropriate, but if you use anything for return to service quality, it needs to be what? Calibrated. How do you calibrate a drill bit? With a calibrated micrometer. You can do it yourself. You don't know that. Let's see. Don't use the pointy end.
The sharp side.
Let's see. Yeah, it's funny when you check the float level on these. You have to use the gasket thickness. Turn it upside down. Use the gasket thickness. You'll see. You'll be doing that. Do not use shop air to test floats. Want another story?
Really?
It's one of those things, and the real lesson learned on this one is if you're. Is that okay? Story.
Yeah.
Okay. If this is the big lesson, there's two lessons. Number one is when troubleshooting is becoming very, very difficult, and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do, and you grab somebody and ask them real quick, and they give you a suggestion. Don't do that.
Right away. Yeah.
Because and the inverse is true, and I had to learn this one. When somebody asks me a question about troubleshooting, don't say a freaking thing unless I've got time to really sit down and listen. So we had an engine that was just overhauled. I was not in the engine shop at this time. So the mechanic had overhauled the engine. He also overhauled the carburetor. And we put it on, and every time he started it, it would like go, it was weird. It would go super high RPM and die. Just and then die. Something like that. It's kind of weird. And just couldn't get the freaking thing to run. And, they're troubleshooting everything and doing all kinds. And I was just, walking by doing something, and it's like, oh man, kind of out of ideas we can do. And, it's like, oh, I don't know, it just sounds like, it's a fuel restriction or something. It's getting fuel and it's not, it runs, but then it runs out of fuel suddenly, which is what it sounds like. It would go up a lot of fuel and then die. I go, I don't know, all the fuel passages open. I mean, you blow them out with like air and stuff. And you blow some air through it, see if the fuel passages. You think that through. You have a carburetor that floats if they're down and the jet is open. You can blow some air in there and it will go through, but you have a main metering jet that is very, very tiny. And so if you put 110 psi of shop air into the float chamber with brass floats, they will go about that flat. So, yeah, it really didn't. And then I don't remember what happened. I think they, tried that and then turned the fuel on. Then it just flooded everything. Like, well, shit, now the floats don't work. Open it back up and the floats are, the brass floats are
Pancakes.
they're about that thick, So,
For 3 to 5 psi.
turns out there were some O-rings that went inside of the this particular carburetor in the throttle shaft area that were left out. So it was getting a massive air leak and didn't want to run. So yeah, don't use shop air. Any leakage past intake gaskets, throttle bushings, etc. will be most noticeable at idle. there's been reports of mechanics installing carburetors, and they put a gasket on, and the opening for the gasket is about that big, and instead of being this big. So you make a little restrictor plate, because they'll just take a gasket that fits all 4 holes and matches the outside, slap it on there and put it on. Well, there are different size openings for these carburetors, and so if you use the wrong size opening, you have made a restrictor plate. So be careful which gaskets you're using. That's an easier button to push. So that doesn't work. See, use new gaskets. Be careful with that. Plate. All right, we talked a lot about controls. Do I need to go over that one more time? Maybe. Oh, cushion. You know what cushion is? Throttle cushion, control cushion. When you push your throttle all the way in, it should hit out here at the carburetor and leave, I don't know, they say 1/8 to 1/4 inch is pretty good. I like a little bit more. I like to be able to see it when I'm flying. Go, hey, there it is. So it should always hit at the carburetor, at whatever stop is out there before you hit the stop in the airplane. I was going to say there was one exception to that. I don't know what it was. I ran across. Anyway. Yes, so don't always make sure you have some cushions so you know from the inside of the cockpit that you went all the way forward and it's hitting out at the carburetor, not hitting the control panel. And now you don't know, am I actually full stop out there, or full wide open or not? So make sure, all right, troubleshooting. Carburetor leaks while the engine is off. What do you think? Give me some ideas, see what you learned.
Fuel level 2 high?
Needle. Valve is
I got some good stuff. Okay, so I've got needle and seat are leaking. I got
Fuel too high? Fuel level?
fuel level too high, which is a problem with the
Mechanism?
float setting. Float setting I'm looking for. So yeah, float setting, that's what you were going through over there. Yeah, very good. So float level is too high. How do we repair the needle and seat? Replace them.
Sorry.
How do we fix the float level too high? Depends on the carburetor. The Stromburg, you're going to take it apart and shim it. The Marvel Schebler, you just bend a little tab. Take it apart, bend a little tab. Mixture too lean at idle. Mixture's too lean at idle. Too lean at idle. Got what? Air bleed blocked? Air bleed blocked. All right. Air bleed blocked would probably be Rich on that one. Yeah.
Oh, you said lean, sorry.
Yeah. So too lean.
The throttle shaft bushings?
Throttle shaft bushings, which led to a
Lean
air leak. Air leaks. Throttle shaft bushings, gaskets, hoses, anything in the induction system. Too lean. Let me see. What else? Idle mixture is
Too lean.
just not set correctly. All right. Idle jet.
Is restricted?
Idle jet restriction. Little piece of dirt or something got in there. Also fuel pressure too low. Low wing aircraft. Yeah. Mixture too lean at cruise or full power. Be hard to note that one. Figure it out. You may notice on your EGTs and stuff. So mixture lean at cruise or full power.
Low float setting.
Low float settings. I'll take that. That one's a good one.
Same thing with the jet.
Same thing with the jet. We could have an obstructed jet. Let me see.
Is it the same thing with the mixture being too lean as well?
It's kind of hard. I did write down mixture control not set correctly, but it's really hard to screw that. It's either right or it's wrong. It's so wrong that's, yeah, it's indexed and stuff. Float level too low. Air leak. Automatic mixture control out of adjustment. Sometimes you can adjust them, or you could even adjust the air bleed, like in the bigger carburetors. Fuel strainer clogged, perhaps, for those guys that only check them at overhaul. Let's see. Obstruction in the fuel line, kinks in the fuel lines. Fuel me see. Too lean at full throttle, it could have an economizer problem, which should be called a power enrichment at that point. Mixture too rich at idle. Ooh, this is a good one. Mixture too rich, and you're going to want to write this one down. Mixture too rich at idle.
Air bleed, clogged.
Possible, yes. Most likely problem,
Your
idle mixture out of adjustment. The actual most likely cause for somebody complaining that their idle mixture is way too rich and they can't adjust it.
The needle and seat.
You left the primer unlocked. So I told you aircraft have a primer. You pull it out. You have to unlock it and pull it out. When it's in, forward, and locked, it locks the primer system from interacting with the engine. When you leave it unlocked, it pops out a little bit, and the suction from the cylinders pulls fuel all the way back from the primer, bypasses the primer, goes right up the tank, and you made little fuel injectors.
And you leave it locked.
So if you unlock it, it will have.
You're saying to relock it.
You better push it in and lock it.
Okay.
But that happens on our ground power unit all the time. I get one of you guys out there trying to adjust your carburetor for 3 days. What is going on? I just won't work. Why don't you just push that in and lock it, and I'll try it. Or worse, you actually spend a great deal of time getting it set up, and then you're so happy with it. I walk out, I go, well, I'll try it again now that the primer's in and locked, because now it's running super lean, like it's all messed up. So don't do that. So yeah, too rich, primer line open. Yeah, at cruising speed and such, I suppose you could have one of the check valves in the accelerator went bad, but I haven't seen that. Let me see. All right. Throw it on the ground. Define a stoichiometric mixture.